Thanks.
Are you in the country, Phil?
No, it's not.
What's that, Tom?
Are you in the United States?
No, I am not.
Take this is how work it again.
I hope the sun's out where you are.
It's about 79 and the sun is out.
Good.
Oh, the sun is out here, too.
Yeah, it's just like here.
It's just like here. And
Minus 40 degrees.
it's absolutely gorgeous. We're outside. We're having an outdoor meeting.
I'm glad you're having a wonderful time. I'll put my mojito down now. That was in poor taste. I apologize.
No, that's right.
Suzanne checked in.
Suzanne,
Yes, I'm here, Tom. Yes, I am. I'm all set, ready to go.
Call the meeting to order. It's 12:07. Rick was at the last minute called out. Will not be attending.
so I know that their approval of the minutes, but Dave has something that he wants to change on one of the minutes. And so we need to wait for him for a minute. He just went upstairs to print something out for me.
Okay.
Did he say which of the minutes he was in conflict with?
I don't remember. He didn't indicate today, so he said he told me last week, but
Yeah, it was the January 12th one that he had an issue with, but we also have a problem with the January 5th because I omitted the request for the ambulance stretcher, so I need to amend those as well.
So should we make a motion to approve the January 5th minutes while we're waiting for Dave?
Well, I don't have a problem with that.
With those two? They just said it was the 12th one.
no, he said it's fifth.
Oh, he did.
And the
No.
It's both.
It's both, right. Dave's is the 12th. My omission was on the 5th.
Right.
Since it's a regular meeting, can we just skip the approval of minutes?
Sure.
now?
Move it a little bit later. Move the approval of the minutes to the end?
Right.
Okay. Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm next. Okay, so as you all know, I presented our initial summary to the Board of Selectmen yesterday. I also, because we had two reporters here, we had Kate Hewitt from the Connecticut Examiner, Reagan, from the day. They asked me to send them a copy, which I did last night, late, and so they have it as well. And I gave a very brief summary at the Board of Finance meeting last night. I was asked to by Andy Russell, and that is that. But in the meantime, everybody was pleased with what they heard and read. Everybody was very impressed with how many people responded. So thank you again, Cheryl and everyone.
Nice job, Cheryl, on organizing that and getting that out as one package, and Martha for seeing that I got it down here in Mexico.
May I, on your behalf, send that to Limelight?
You may certainly do that. But let me send you a corrected copy because I realized that the word residence auto-corrected.
Oh, okay.
So we meant residents like live here,
and
it corrected to residents like people. We had it twice in the
Okay.
So I fixed that last night for the newspaper reporters.
Okay. Great.
I picked that up. Okay, so moving on.
Yep.
We moved minutes to the end.
Oh, good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Oh, this isn't it.
The fourth item now, Tom, is
Yes, it is. Thank you so much.
right.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the fourth item, we were asked to review the comments that were painstakingly put together by our subcommittee. Thank you again, subcommittee. We broke out the request by sort of areas of expertise. And the first ones up are public safety, which is myself, Mary Jo Nossel, and Dave Revere. Dave, you want to start?
Hi there. Going through Martha's compilation of summarizing a lot of this, there's 63.77% reinvestment into government services. How we weigh that out in the number of comments versus the total number of individuals taking the exam or taking the questionnaire, I have no idea. I don't know what the relationship is of that percentage to the number of, nor could I find it. But there seems to be a interest in seeing that some of this funding is reinvested back into government for public safety or emergency services, as they called it.
Is that it?
Basically.
Okay, and I'll follow up. As I said, Dave and I both worked on this. Thank you, Dave. What I did was go through all the comments, and I've outlined the questions, the responses were directly related to our responsibility. And as Dave summarized, there is definitely an interest in public safety in the community from the questionnaire. The question review I just overall I thought was really important. It put some context to all of the responses. Again, I really appreciate it. Of the public safety related comments, I found that the question for question 10, there were 5 questions that I found comments that related to that area. Question 10, question 16, test question 28, question 67, and the additional data questions. So basically I came up with 27 responses that related to public safety. I'm not sure if we want to go through them individually. The committee can let me know, but for a summary, I would say that of the 27, few respondents identified as first responders. Overall, there was concern for inefficient public health safety messaging. There is value in providing access for testing and PPE. There was a noted increase in crime shared by some respondents during the pandemic. There was appreciation for the emergency first responders shared in the question. Does anyone want me to go into any more detail? Let me give you an example, and then you can decide on that. Question 10 was, did your primary income earner return to a job after being furloughed or laid off? And with that question, there were 4 out of the 25 responses that I thought concerned essential workers. One person defined themselves as an emergency worker, or essential worker rather. One is an essential employee, but you can't tell if it was government or business employee. One household, 2 respondents said they were frontline employees, and one considered themselves essential. So that feeds back to, there were very few respondents that identified as emergency workers or essential workers, which frankly kind of surprised me. Question 16 was, over the next year, do you feel your overall financial position will? And there was one response that I thought was germane. One person said, or one household responded, continuing pandemic will increase the burden on healthcare workers. Question 28, which was kind of a big one. Is there anything else you would like to share with us regarding your household's experience during COVID-19? There was a lot of good information in that. 10 out of 30 responses I felt were germane to this. This is where the majority of the comments are needing a better public safety messaging system and more or less a procedure for how we use that would be helpful. Question 67 was, is there anything else you would like to share with us regarding how the pandemic affected your business or home life? 10 out of the 64 respondents were kind of germane. And this is where more of the questions, responses were more about having more dissemination of COVID test kits, COVID testing sites, and the difficulty people have had in getting those services. That's pretty much overall, other than the added data, those extra questions, which there were two. Again, both of those were responses by essential workers, and they basically said the money is promised to them. They want to have that acknowledged by the committee. So that's sort of a summary. And I guess to go back to Dave's comment, there definitely is an interest. As we know, most of the people that responded live in Old Lyme, and so there's an interest in this. But I do think it shows that overall there's a major interest in having better communication systems for the public of public health concerns. Any questions?
I did find that comment about the essential workers being promised the money and didn't get, and I wasn't aware of that. So was that like at the state level or something?
Well, no. I think it's just one of the areas that towns can use with the funds is they can reward essential workers, people that had to work during the pandemic, other people to isolate, people that were on the front line.
Well, I thought they were saying that they had been promised.
I think that was what the person was saying, yeah. But in truth, I don't believe that was actually legal.
If I can jump in on that, I think what you're speaking of, Cheryl, is the discussion between the state's labor unions and state employees over the state workers being promised or being recognized as essential workers and receiving some benefit from the state program. The ARPA funds that we have allow us to do something on a local level, but it's all up for discussion on the local side. Municipalities or local governments will not be affected by funding essential worker funding from the state. They're just dealing with their own state employees.
Yeah. No, this was the comment. There were 4 people in the household who worked in retail, and they considered themselves. It was the in the comments that I shared late because I had to sanitize it for identity. Right. And they were working at local retail establishments and were considered essential, and maybe had the misinformation that they were going to get some sort of stipend or something for being essential workers, and then maybe they felt like the state stopped that.
It did mention local or state in that comment, but it may be something we can address in information to the public going forward.
Yeah. Thank you.
Asking a quick question to Nicole. If the committee ever opted to do some kind of payment, reimbursement, whatever you want to call it, to essential workers, and we came up with a bona fide selection process, how much grief and aggravation would that be for handling the finance aspect of funds? Would we have to 1099 individuals? Would this create an additional workload for finance if the committee recommended this?
Payments come to town, so you can handle it. I thought I read a long time ago that anything is not a 1099, but I have to go back and confirm that that is the final. I don't know if it has to go through payroll at this point or just a lump sum like you pay a vendor. I'm not sure. I have to look at that.
Okay. So if the committee did opt to support something like this,
I don't think it'd be a big deal unless you need us to go back and see what the hours of work because they don't work the same.
yeah.
Work 1 day a month versus 10 days a month. So, I mean, if there's research that we have to do, done.
Dave, could you repeat the answer? I couldn't hear that.
Say that again.
I absolutely could. I could hear Nicole's voice, but I couldn't decipher what she was saying.
Okay. Well, my question was...
I heard your question.
That's the question.
I think her answer, if you could speak up a little, Nicole, so he can hear her, step up to the mic, or give your answer again.
Basically, to summarize, Nicole said that payroll would handle it if they had to. There might be some research involved to be, because there are some people who are working part-time, some people working full-time. So if we did something as far as essential worker, COVID, I'm going to call it payments or bonuses, whatever, then we would have to do some research. They would be able to do it, but it would cause additional time in the finance office.
Correct. That I was concerned about that, the level of effort, one, and then how do you define equity in that sandbox?
Right. So we would have to come up with a formula for that.
Right. Thank you.
Any other comments on public safety?
Just, I noticed a few comments in here referencing town communication. Not quite a few that mentioned like improved town communication or congratulating us for good communication, but there were several in here. So.
Yeah, I thought that really interesting. There was quite a few comments on that.
Our present means of communicating with the town is pretty much across every platform that's out there. Trying to expand upon that, and, going through this detail and finding out more specifics on what they're looking for. I mean, we're on social platforms, we're on town website, we're on Facebook, we're on municipal or electronic newspapers. We're sending emails and reminders out. We're using reverse 911, and we're doing voluntary text communication. There's not much left.
I don't think this is
critical.
Yeah, I don't think they're trying to.
They're not being critical.
No, I don't. I think what they're asking for is consistency, and to have that communicated more frequent. There was a direct comparison between what we do and what Saybrook does in the comments. So I think it's all opportunity for the town, and a perfectly adequate, good reason to use the ARPA funds if the committee so.
I agree. Interesting, there were more than one comment about the the public safety parade and how much people appreciated that.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
They weren't going to remember that.
But I did
early.
list all those, and that one really I thought was
There were a couple of people who said that.
very much so. And I think I didn't even go into my general comments, but overall, people were pretty positive about how the town worked out COVID, the pandemic, and the response. So overall, it was a positive result, and that's the good thing. And then the comments that really, I mean, there were more smiley faces, let me put it that way, on how the town performed, how the nonprofits supported the town, how the emergency system supported the town, than anything. So, I mean, that is the good takeaway from this.
There weren't many comments on this, but another thing that I noticed was that a few people mentioned the public meetings and the ability to watch those remotely. And I think, you know, if we have another cycle of this pandemic where people, you know, we're just coming out of Omicron, knock on wood now, but if we have another cycle where people want to watch a meeting rather than just call in.
And not just watch, participate.
Absolutely, Jen. Thank you for that.
I do hear a lot of criticism about that.
Yeah.
That it's just not ideal.
And compared to other small towns here.
Yeah.
Well, I know we are, on a sidebar, we're working to enhance the systems here with other funding streams, but it's still in its infantile stage. Our goal is to make it more conducive for someone to do a hybrid meeting. Easier on the presenter, easier on the participants, and we're moving forward with that, but like I said, it's in the infantile stage right now, just doing one project out.
And I think that's another good communication that we need to get out to the general public when we summarize these results, that we recognize the key areas and the key comments surrounding that. I mean, we've been in COVID now for 2 years. And if we're seeing now the comments are, we need to communicate better, we need to have more hybrid, more virtual access to people. Yes, that's a crossover between infrastructure, but it's a direct public safety. I think that's the takeaway and the value of this survey in this area.
I agree, and I think that looking towards a hybrid, something equivalent to either Teams or Zoom or Duo or something like that, going forward, as Dave said, there's some investigation under other project monies to move that process forward for the town.
Michelle Noren has told us that WebEx is the most secure.
WebEx
WebEx has the best security.
Right, and it historically that has been true.
But the Board of Education uses Zoom, and it works like a charm. We haven't had any issue.
Yeah. My Teams also is managed by Microsoft, and they have a very high bar for security as well.
Okay, I think we're getting off a little bit of a summary.
Jumping ahead.
Is there anybody else for comments on public safety? If not, I'll defer to the next group. Okay, entertainment, arts, hospitality is up.
Okay. If you want more paper, I made copies of my notes. Well, thank you, Cheryl. I just want to make a point about tourism and hospitality. Increasing visitors or bringing back visitors to Old Lyme is, in a lot of ways, a small business strategy. Our restaurants, our retailers, places like Black Hall Outfitter all rely on our tourists. And I think there's a disconnect on that for a number of residents I've just seen over the last couple of years. So we have two types of tourists here. We have cultural tourists, that come for the art museums and galleries or to be on plein air. And then we have summer tourists that come for fun and relaxation along the shoreline and to do things like at Black Hall Outfitters and all. So I see this as a subset of small business support, because when people come for Wee Ferry Village, they go to Old Line Ice Cream Shop, or they go for the Hideaway. So all of these tourism activities and events support our small businesses, and that's reflected in the fact, and I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage because I could go into the survey and slice it a few different ways. Only 5 restaurants or retailers responded to the survey. So I looked at how those 5 restaurants and retailers weighed the 11 different things. And 5 of the restaurants and retailers rated small business assistance as most important, which, makes total sense. And then 4 of them also rated increasing visitors as most important, and 1 of them as important. So the restaurants and retailers understand increasing visitors, which is considered tourism, hospitality, entertainment, is a small business strategy. So the restaurants and retailers, they have had a little bit of a rough patch. 3 say that they are not financially sound at this time. They're having trouble paying bills, inflation. We all know our home grocery bills are going up. Their food budgets are going up for their ingredients. 2 said they had home heating, trouble paying weekly expenses like home heating and food shopping. 1 restaurant went from 39 employees to 22, and now they're not having enough. They're unable to hire enough qualified people. The arts and cultural organizations, there were 10. There were 9 plus 1 whose weighted interests were only the sewers and broadband. Every other issue shouldn't be considered. But the other 9 had a mix of, interest. And they also served Old Lyme during the pandemic. They all pivoted to provide services. In some cases, they grew their customer base by taking on Zoom workshops or, virtual gallery tours or outdoor location activities. They had to upgrade their internet or hardware. 4 of the 9, so 1 of the cultural organizations, the one that was only interested in sewer and broadband, they only have volunteers. They don't have employees. 4 out of the other 9 are currently seeking funds. 3 have received funds but do not plan to seek additional funds. 4 believe business will improve. 4 say the same. 1 sees business worsening. And then looking at all the comments from respondents, there's a variety. Some people see that we need to attract visitors to improve conditions for our businesses, and others say they certainly don't want to encourage people to come here. And 1 subset of that is that someone is concerned about people traveling here from other places, particularly in the summer, and not having mask mandates in public places in place, so they'd like to see that. We have 1, I'll just highlight 1 other comment. It's from someone who has 2 seasonal businesses in Old Lyme, and they closed for the protection of all during the pandemic. They had no income, yet their taxes and insurance still had to be paid, and they're not sure if they'll ever make up those losses without help. Any questions?
I think sometimes people don't think far enough out. They think that the restaurant can survive on just those of us that live here. We have to have that input. It's the same in every town. I mean, you need that push, whether it's Killington, Vermont, who needs the winter people, and people along the shoreline need summer tourism to come into play. But if you don't pull in tourism, then those businesses will fail and we won't have any services in town. And we will continue going across the bridge to Saybrook for dinner or the other way into East Lyme, because both of those towns know how to sort of play the game on even levels, how to promote tourism as well as having quality businesses for their year-round.
Exactly. And I skipped over this, but looking at how people took advantage of different amenities in town during the pandemic, 500 respondents took advantage of restaurants and takeout options during the pandemic. So, how many people need to come through the door to support a Hideaway or an Old Lyme Inn or,
Right.
The population of one town isn't going to do it, of a small town. I think 230 respondents took advantage of museums and art galleries during the pandemic. I don't have anything else. You don't have questions.
Mary and Jen.
Yeah, Health and Social Services. Well, I noticed on the survey that the primary, question 7, during the pandemic, the primary earner of my household, the majority said continued to stay fully employed. But there were 53 people who said that their primary earner was either reduced, laid off, or permanently lost their job. But it was the secondary earner that seemed to take the biggest hit. There were way more people who had talked about the secondary wage earner. That was 98 people of the secondary wage earner who had reduced hours, laid off, or permanently lost their job. So I found that interesting.
Some of that might be related to childcare at the beginning,
Yeah.
when people had to stay home and help their children.
Right, but this was
long.
like furloughed or laid off or lost,
But we didn't give them an option to say stayed home to help the children.
No, we didn't. I had a question about question 13 because that was the question. During the COVID pandemic, we asked them about, were you able to pay rent, food shopping, pay your utilities? And it seems that, I'm sure, there are some individuals who checked off each one, like they had difficulty paying for all of them. There were 4 options there: heating, utilities, food shopping, and mortgage or rent. And so rent or mortgage was 19. Quite a few people skipped this question too, I noticed that. So I'm not sure if that's an accurate representation.
You can't say 19 out of 900.
No.
Yeah.
Over question 16, over the next year, do you feel your overall financial position will? 95 people said worsen. I thought that was a lot. So 95 out of 600 who answered that question said they felt it will worsen. 400 said stay the same, and about 100 said will improve. So there were just so many comments about that mentioned the word inflation or cost of living and prices going up. And I stopped counting. I got into the 30s, 40s of comments about that. So
yeah, inflation is a big issue, and it's not something that's specific to Old Lyme. Connecticut, of course, is a higher cost of living state compared to other states, but Mary and I just noticed that January 1st, the electric rates went up for Eversource 20%.
Wow.
20%. Check your bill.
Oh, yeah.
It will be higher. And that's going to affect everyone.
Wow.
So when your electric bill is 20% higher, fuel oil might be up, food costs are up. It's going to be tough. And that's not, yes, it's related to the pandemic. It's not related to the pandemic. How can we parse that out? But
right.
It's going to be tough for people.
Right. Child care is another issue. The question 21, if you utilized child care before the pandemic, what happened? And 66 people indicated that they lost their child care provider or they no longer can afford child care. 66 out of, 114 answered that. The most it was not relevant to them. But that's a lot. And I know that the only daycare center in Old Lyme, which is the Old Lyme Children's Learning Center, did close for a large chunk of time during the pandemic, and all of those families had to figure it out, on where to go. So I think Old Lyme has one home daycare provider, and now the Old Lyme Children's Learning Center is back open, but I believe it's still a struggle for them.
And they had submitted a request for funding to us at the beginning, before this committee was formed.
Yes.
So we do have a letter from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then regarding mental health, I was pleased to see a couple positive comments about programs that were out there from OASB, but I noticed other comments where people, seniors feel socially isolated. Quite a few about seniors and the cost of isolation too, but also the mental health of youth being negatively impacted by the pandemic. A lot of positive comments about the school, though, praising the school for staying open, which we know that was unusual in our region, right, in our state. So people really appreciated that for the second year of the pandemic. But quite a few comments about mental health. People worried about the mental health of their kids.
Yeah, and mental health is not an easy solution. There's no easy solutions to it because the system is overtaxed right now. It's hard for people to find therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, and they have to deal with the insurance. It's not like a one-point entry. You have to make phone calls. You have to see what your insurance covers. You have to schedule. It's complicated. So it's not like flip the switch, throw some money at it, and it's fixed. It doesn't work like that. So.
Right. There was one comment about mental health that an individual was looking, and every provider that she contacted was full and had a wait list, and she just gave up. Or he or she.
Yeah, and then also it's affecting emergency rooms because they're seeing more youth mental health in emergency rooms, right, Mary? Would you say?
Yeah, along with EMS and transports.
Yeah. So I do think, that youth in particular have lost a lot during the pandemic, and more opportunities for socialization is really, I think, important to their mental health. It's really hard wearing masks all day at school and not getting together as much as they used to. So it makes a big difference. I know that little ones, particularly 3-year-olds, who start preschool, have been very isolated up until now, and hearing anecdotal stories about these 3-year-olds coming to school completely unsocialized. They've only been with their parents, and so they're babies, where in the past these kids would have had many more experiences with their peers.
If you had a lot of ARPA funding for mental health, is there enough supply of services so that you
mean providers?
Money on relief?
It would be hard. You mean providers? Would there be enough providers? Yeah, that would be a challenge. Yeah. I mean, we could get creative, but yes, it will be.
I think that's a really important question, and it may relate to the public health area also. If you can do some teleservices, if you can put some money towards mental health services that address some of the isolation, address some of the needs for the children at home. I think it could be done creatively by the town. I was kind of surprised that there weren't more comments, and maybe it was just the way we asked the questions about Park and Rec. I mean, what are they doing to socialize our community, especially our young people?
There were a couple comments saying that they wish there was more.
Yeah.
And there was one that specifically mentioned OASB. They wish OASB would offer more after-school programming type stuff, which I found interesting.
Everybody knows you. I think
I think we offer more positive youth development programs than Park and Rec does, but that doesn't mean Park and Rec couldn't. I mean, I think,
Yeah, but there may be a way of linking the infrastructure to reaching out to the social isolation that the pandemic necessarily caused when we were told we had to quarantine or isolate.
But I think it's across the age span.
Yeah.
There was a comment also that sort of struck me from a first responder about the mental health of the number of calls and so on and so forth. I don't have it in front of me, but I remember thinking that was Dave touched on it for half a second there, and I remember thinking that that's something we should think about as well. I don't know what the resolution is, but it was the number of calls and so on and so forth having an adverse effect on their life outside of their work.
There wasn't very much talk about teachers, was there?
I don't remember seeing that.
Personnel.
No, there really wasn't. A lot of thank yous to school personnel, but not about their mental health or...
I was just going to add to your comments on the child care. I noticed a fair amount of comments regarding grandparents who had their family members move in with them and became the caretakers, necessarily became the caretakers. I think some felt joy, if you read it, but some felt that that was an added burden and it was stressful for them.
Anything else for mental health or? No. Now, I did notice a couple comments, though, in the general comments in question 67. Is there anything else you'd like to share? There were three comments that specifically where people said, please fund the needy, basically. Think of those people. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
But affordable housing was one of the least.
Yeah, but when people selected one of the 11 categories, affordable housing was the least. But there was one that said, response number 60, 1/3 of the ARPA funds should reach the most disadvantaged in our community. Okay, and then there was another one, number 46, please look to the needy. And number 17 also had, no, that wasn't 17. There were a few that mentioned that, but they were hoping that the most needy and disadvantaged people in our community would receive the majority of the funding. And I thought that was...
And it's interesting, to your point, Jen, that people disconnect the idea of
affordable housing.
Having housing that's affordable for the needy and affordable housing, capital A, capital H.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there were several comments in here. People were worried about that their rent was going to go up, and it's true. Yeah, it's very hard to find.
Yeah, and if all the price of everything else goes up, you have less money to go around.
Yeah.
So you have to start prioritizing the basics.
Yeah.
Rent, heat, food.
Related. Yep. Okay, what's next?
Me.
Martha.
Bill and I are up. So basically, I did a lot with the general comments just to pull through, but basically what we saw with infrastructure and Bill and I, and the highest one was broadband, internet, town communication. I mean, it seems to be an excessive need for broadband. People talked about their cell service, that it's spotty in areas in this town. And I know because we've tried different ones over the years, and sometimes you're out on your back deck and you're in the house. But there's a lot on that. The access to town meetings is huge, that it should be the same for every town meeting. A lot of people said it shouldn't be that one group is just listening, one group is calling, one group has Zoom. I mean, it's got to change. It's got to be consistent from town government that all meetings are the same way. Also a town-wide communication system for emergency purposes in case of natural disasters or another type of pandemic coming down the pike. We need to be prepared. There was discussion about some of our infrastructure projects. There were some people who were very positive about putting some money towards the sewers because although it may not be benefiting all of us as far as the sewers itself, if we put some money towards it, it would lower taxes, keep taxes low for the town, some of the townspeople. It also, of course, shows that we're trying to improve our town, and that draws more people here to continue to buy houses and things like that. I thought there was some really wonderful comments about ways to improve accessibility. Number of comments about bike paths. sidewalks in some areas of town that don't normally have them, but because of more kids walking places, Town Woods Road was mentioned at the beginning, especially for our high school kids who may park over at Town Woods and then walk to the boathouse. It's dangerous. It's a narrow road. It's heavily traveled. There should be sidewalks there for them. And beach access, that we have very little accessibility to beaches for handicapped people, seniors who would love to go to the beach and find it very difficult that we don't put something out there for them to get there. And I think as long as when you're able to do all those things, you stop thinking about the people who can't unless you see someone having difficulty. Mm-hmm. A lot of comments about flooding. After the other day, we would have had more. I only pulled one comment from the crib, but there might be more in another area that I didn't look at excessively. Bill, you may have picked something up when you were reading. There was a lot of general comments, just investing wisely, invest in capital infrastructure. There was...
right.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that the broadband issue seemed to be sort of the overarching issue with the infrastructure issue, and I think that going forward we need to think about and assess those areas like that little stretch of Route 1 past Boughton Road and all of that, and take a look at, phone reception and broadband reception in different areas of the town, and think about what we want to do if we want to address that with the funds that we have available. I think I sent early on. The other thing was the outfall issue came up. There were a couple of comments about that, and there seemed to be almost, it appeared to be a disproportionate amount with regard to the sewers. But as you stated earlier, maybe, it makes the town more attractive, and maybe some contribution and some working together can make that happen. The other thing that I didn't see in there, and I mentioned to you, Martha, and I think I sent it to Dave as well, was that a lot of these facilities, whether they know it or not, and the town has already undertaken some of this, is the effort to improve indoor air quality. And I don't know if this is the time or the forum, but certainly we in the town are moving forward with upgrading our HVAC systems, and as part of that and as a result of COVID, have had to do some additional work with regard to filtration and so on and so forth. And this was touched on when Ian came over from the school, Region 18, as well, but I wanted to mention that. But as far as the comments, I think in order of decreasing priority or decreasing the decreasing percentages, the broadband was for some reason the single largest issue that was spoken to.
I think there's a lot of misinformation around broadband. I had an experience 2 years ago. I bought a Peloton, which takes a lot of bandwidth to run the screen. And I had Comcast as my provider, and I thought I had terrific capacity in the house. I had never had a big issue. As soon as I got the Peloton, I paid in and out, and it wouldn't work. So I got Geek Squad in, and I said, I've got this terrific service, purportedly, from Comcast, with all these megabits per second, and it will work. So they measured what I actually had, and I had a fraction of what I was paying for. As I remember, I had something like 6, and I thought I was paying for 200 megabytes per second. So it was enormous. So they said, well, all right, call Comcast and get this higher speed service, which I already thought I had, but I didn't, and get an Orbi in the house, which is a secondary router in the house, which basically converts it from just one point where you're taking it out of the wall to the whole house, including the basement. And as soon as I did that, it went from, single digits to triple digits, and I haven't had an issue since. So what I wonder, and I see this in Zoom calls all the time, where people will be just fine, and they get garbled and they kind of fade away, and then it comes back in waves, and they've got the same issue. They've got this minimum bandwidth, which destroys the broadband connection. So my whole point here is, and I think broadband's a good issue, but if we want to do something about it, it's a lot more than just throwing money at it. It's understanding, what do I really have, and don't believe.
Think of it. Go ahead. Think of it as a hose. The size of the hose determines the amount of water you can get in the house. And if they're only sending, a half a gallon a minute, that's all you're going to get, no matter how big you make the hose. That's right. And then the other way around is you can only get a half a gallon a minute if you restrict the size of the hose. I mean, that's oversimplification, but that's the principle.
It's not the town's job to go into your house and provide.
But how about education of the residents to say?
Would be good.
That's correct. And I don't think that should be our job.
Yeah, those are some public notices that could go out and say, if you're noticing this, try this or this, and it's, you have various populations that may not be as well versed in IT and networking. You put it in your house, you think that's it, and then they walk away thinking it's going to work forever. But we did the same thing. We had to put hotspots in our house all of a sudden because it wasn't working all over the house as well as it used to.
You put what?
What?
What did you put in?
Hotspots.
Oh.
That's what I call them.
Yeah, no, I think this is a huge issue, and I think if we do get this infrastructure bill passed, we need the town officials, we need our state officials identifying that as a really key need. I know during one of the storms a couple of years ago where we were without power for some time, the power came back on, but the Comcast and Frontier followed like a week later in some cases. It was ridiculous. And we all found out that, at least where our neck of the woods, which houses some first responders, that Comcast has one node from basically the beach north that services that whole side of the town. And it's not enough, there are not enough big infrastructure to handle all the people, let alone all their equipment that goes on that. That is a safety issue. If we can't get information to the public about a storm, about a public health, about a mass giveaway for even, then we can't reach our public, and that is something we have to work with the companies.
Right, and I think that should be investigated. I'm a former state employee, and the last thing I want to recommend here is that this committee undertake or participate in another study. But there are specific areas in the town where there are issues around that. And as stated earlier, my call actually got dropped. I just called back in, so I don't know what I've missed. I missed about 3 or 4 minutes of this. I apologize for that. But I think that we should at least approach the Comcasts and the Frontiers of the world and have that discussion. And I happen to work with both of those folks in my job with the town, and I think going forward that might add value to this discussion.
Although other towns have more choices than two, also, like East Lyme has.
Yes.
And there's other options.
Yes, they do, simply because based on population. Unfortunately, they're publicly held companies, and they will service the areas with the most available consumers. And we're 7,900 people.
But Bill, if they're running the wires from, let's just say, they're running the wires to East Lyme, and if they're running the wires to Saybrook, aren't they continuing the wires over Old Lyme?
Depending upon the type of service they're installing, the answer is likely yes, and the caveat is maybe. Because there are different means to do that, and a lot of the signal is point of aim, point of impact. So if it's cable, it's a closed loop system, but they may have to install a relay station or do something else. But they will certainly spend more money and effort to target a larger population base.
Okay, so maybe we.
And then when they're in town, to go one step further, when they're in town, they will. My street is a perfect example. I mean, all of those homes were built in 1996, and we were at the tail end of cell service and Wi-Fi service. So for a while, it was unavailable, completely unavailable, because there wasn't enough population base to run the wiring down there to offset the cost to do it.
Okay. Well, I guess we need some professional development on what that entails. That's a town-wide PD, not a... Okay. Thanks, Bill.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, thank you. Oh.
Questions? Dennis, you ready to go?
Yeah. Do you have what I sent? Because I sent it all to you and Rick, and I didn't even bring a copy. This is small business, or is
Small
it
business.
sewer and water?
No, small.
It's an industry.
Industry.
Okay. Do you have what I sent?
No, I did not bring it.
I don't have it either. Well, the conclusion from the small business was that many of them were adversely impacted by the pandemic. One went out of business in the whole town and doesn't plan to reopen. And we don't know who that is, but we might be able to find out from the source documents if they filled in their name.
They didn't.
They didn't.
I just checked on that. I mean, we do know of a handful of small businesses that closed.
But it's clear that a number of them, and I think it is from memory, is 30 to 40 businesses that responded. All of them were negatively impacted. So the question is, you take that class, they didn't go out of business, but they're all hurting compared to what they would have had pre-pandemic. And do we want to help some of them along with some ARPA funds, or earmark some ARPA funds for small business and see who files and how much they were impacted? I think in the spirit of fairness, everybody was hurt, but some were hurt more than others, depending on the business. And I'm sure it would appreciate some ARPA help, but I think it's up to each of them to make their case. And again, we're going to have to decide now, when we finally have a methodology, as to are we going to pre-allocate the 2.1 across multiple things and see what comes in. That's one way to do it. And we know some other towns that have done that. And if we did that, I think we would take the 11 categories and force rank them. And clearly, small business and the sewer water thing were the two highest. And they would get an allocation compared with the bottom one, which I think was affordable housing. Although if you've been to Tanger outlets lately, you've noticed that most of the stores are boarded up. So I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, that would be an ideal affordable housing conversion. Take the whole mall, make it into affordable living units, and solve the problem for a whole lot of folks, not just here, but whole Saybrook and Essex and up and down the shoreline. I hadn't heard that before, but I thought it was a pretty good idea. Now, we know what happened when Hope tried to come here. I don't know if Hope's looking at Tanger, but it wouldn't surprise me if it closed, because I went into Williams-Sonoma this week, and, that's one of the few that's still open. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what the future holds for that mall. and there's others, but that may be an answer for affordable housing.
It would be helpful for housing that's affordable in the area, but Old Line would still be on the line for, what do we need, 10%? They don't do it regionally, so we're still responsible for trying to meet that 10%.
Solve the problem within your own boundary.
Yeah, for the legal aspect of it all, but in terms of coming up with some housing that's affordable, what a great location that would be for people.
It would. There's going to be a lot of malls in trouble across the country. The pandemic's accelerated that.
Yeah.
I mean, just look how fast Amazon is. I mean, they deliver in a day or two from when you put it into the computer. And it's so much simpler, and you don't have to worry about catching COVID. So I think it's a permanent shift.
Yeah, Dennis, I was just going to remind the committee that when we did our ranking last meeting and then just updated it recently, investment in Old Line post-pandemic small business recovery was the second highest weighted average.
Well, on the water and sewer, I know we've got contradictory guidance here, and the suggestion is that we get a legal opinion because there's a lot of heat and there's a lot of momentum around the group that wants to have that, get the ARPA money for the sewers. It predates the pandemic, but there's about 9 pages of stuff that we've got in our guidance that says that you can use it for water quality and sewers. But then there's another whole section that says, but it's got to be tied to the pandemic, and you've got to weigh what the impact was of the pandemic on the problem. And this goes back, in some cases, we say 13 years. You know, it's at least a decade issue. And to now say, well, it's a decade, it doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic, but we want the ARPA money. So there was one very good summary comment, I think it was the number one on one of the attachments, that I thought clearly stated a defensible position that it's only going to benefit the beach owner community, so it's a subset of the population. And it does predate it, and we've got conflicting advice, so we better get a legal opinion. Just so the selectmen can head off. If we don't fund it, there's going to be a furor about that. If we do fund it, there'll be a furor from the other side that said, hey, you know, you're discriminating against people that don't live on the beach. But if it's illegal under ARPA, that problem solved. So it could be useful for us if we had a legal opinion. And the question is, do we use the town attorney, where it's a conflict of interest, you could argue, or do we hire a third-party lawyer? I have no idea who, in order to render an opinion on the conflicting interests.
We did talk about the timing, because we have to spend the money by a certain date as well, and the sewer project might not be.
True.
Not so much the water, crib and whatnot, but the sewer project.
Yeah.
So you set aside X amount of money, and the project doesn't get completed in the timeline.
Because I started off completely against that, as not related to the pandemic and predating it. Then the more I read through it, and the fact that they devoted 9 pages of guidance as to how you could spend the money on sewers, it's kind of like, well, I may not like it, but they went to a lot of trouble to say it's absolutely permissible. But then you get to the other guidance that's, yeah, but it's got to be related to how much damage the pandemic did. And that's where it starts to fall apart. So I don't know the answer. I framed it in a 2-pager that I sent to you, but I don't have the answer. So I think the recommendation stand that we need legal guidance because the selectmen are going to face a lot of heat and pressure on this issue. It clearly has got a lot of people in town riled up on both sides.
I think also it appears to me that the committee members are working toward having multiple elements to this funding. Like, we're not just funding the ambulance, or we're not just we're trying to fund a multiple of organizations or efforts or categories even. And so, if there's some subset of 2.16 million that goes to sewers, is that just a drop in the bucket of what is really needed to, does that even make a dent in what needs to happen?
That's the number I've heard.
They're getting clean water funding from the state, so that offsets the total amount.
Okay, so is it down to 7 million or so?
I can't think of the exact numbers.
Yeah.
9.
Well, it's more than.
I was hearing like 14 to 17.
Well, the
More than what we have.
for a certain portion of it, and the private beaches are responsible for a certain portion of it. It's a percentages.
Yeah, but
And there was a referendum passed under a certain amount.
9 million.
9 million, but the clean water funds would take that down to 7. But the bids are coming in, as we know, high, so.
And then also,
But the bids for the project are way above 9.
That's a shared infrastructure, yeah.
But it's still being worked on.
Yep.
and then I think it's evident in the comments that some people are hoping for assistance with what the sewers will be costing them personally versus putting the money into the town's, side of it, which, ultimately is coming out of property taxes or bonds or something. But there's a difference between helping a particular property owner with their portion versus the town helping, or, putting it toward the town's portion.
I just want to say that my impression all along has been consistent with what Cheryl just mentioned. And I thought the group was going toward making a reasonable impact on an awful lot of organizations rather than a drop in the water bucket at the end of Flagler Road or whatever it is down there.
The most good for the most people.
Spread the wealth.
Right.
Can I ask another question of Michelle? Do you know what the estimate is for that crib? Like, what is the cost they're talking about?
That hasn't,
Okay.
it hasn't been determined yet.
Wasn't there supposed to be a meeting on location?
What?
Was there supposed to be a meeting with the engineer?
Tim reported last night that the engineer met with people down at the beach, and that in the process right now, there's a permit being put to see, he's designing and putting a permit for, and I do have the correct wording, but it's, yeah, what is it, sir? Say it again?
Continuation of permission.
Not continuation. He said something else yesterday. Basically, it's a permit that we could get in 90 days versus the 90 days versus DEP permits are going anywhere between 18 months and 3 years. But that would be a more expensive. This would be the fix to get it fixed for this summer. But once that's done, then you'd have to go to find out what the cost is going to be.
Permit first, cost second?
Well, you gotta see if they'll approve it. Because every day that's not approved, those prices go up of everything. Sorry.
Number 5.
Okay?
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, I just am going to say thank you to everybody that took the time to review that document. Again, thank you to the subcommittee. You guys were awesome. There was a lot of comments. We really thank the town and the respondents for giving us this information, because that is the defense that the Board of Selectmen is going to need, that we went through, we outreached to the community, we did our due diligence to review the primary areas that we're responsible for under the Treasury's guidance. So, I mean, I thank the committee members personally, and let's go on.
Okay.
Okay, are we going to compile all those subgroup reports?
I will get mine to you. I want to make a couple of corrections, and I'll get mine to you. It may not be for a day or two.
It's okay.
And everybody else will send theirs along.
You've got mine too?
Yes.
And please, do you want us to include Suzanne on that? When we send it to you, should we also send it to Suzanne? Yeah, well, we'll include the whole group. We'll include the whole group, so she'll have it for minutes. Okay.
Funding.
We going to go down to 5 quickly?
Yes.
And I included these because we're getting updates from old requests, and I think that kind of suggests that we really need to start thinking about funding some of these smaller requests rather than waiting for the final recommendation on June 30th.
Well, we're putting together an application process, correct?
Yes.
So
That's the first
are you
step.
suggesting that we fund some requests outside of the application
No,
process?
but...
No, okay.
No, that we need to move forward.
We need to move forward on an application process. Okay.
Yeah.
On application, yeah.
Saying that you're getting pressure
Yeah.
to do this. And the committee, I think, has been very clear that we are going to set up a process. And that also the Board of Selectmen needs to rely on the process. Otherwise, why are we here?
Yeah.
Let's just
It's arbitrary.
Selectmen do it.
How did you decide that?
No, because
Right.
well, outside.
Okay. Do we have a,
We have a form, right? Tom, Jen had made a form for the committee to use?
no, but I'm saying the application process, we haven't even begun to discuss what that will look like and what tool we will use, what tools we can consider. So that might be an action item for our next agenda, for our next meeting. To discuss that, does anyone have any suggestions or thoughts or ideas on that?
Tom, you might want to check in with Tim. He mentioned there's someone in Middletown who can help us as an outside resource with applications, the process.
And what about the COG? Like, they were working on something as well, and we've also talked about the East Windsor group and what they used.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
a consultant. Okay. So maybe that could be an item on our agenda for the next meeting, is to discuss options for the process and talk about timing, like when we'd like it to kick off and have deadlines and things like that. Because then maybe that would make the Ambulance Association feel better if they knew what the plan was. We just keep saying there will be a plan, but we don't actually have a plan yet. Okay.
And I know Mr. Cordo has been incredibly patient with us.
That's great.
Thank you. So Jen had put a form out, I think it was after I was off the bid committee, before I was back on the committee. Where are we with that form? Did you take that on?
Yeah, I mean, I just take the requests as they come in, and I put them in the form, but anyone can fill out the form, anyone in the committee, not the public. But I don't have, and I had reached out to Tom, some of the original requests before this committee was formed, we had about 5 or 6 letters from different agencies asking for funding. So he's going to get those to me, and I'll put those in, and we should have a fairly good picture of all of the requests that have come through.
And the purpose of that is so that you can keep track of who made a request, and then you send them our letter with our response. Okay.
And hopefully the applicant.
So that they know that we will be back in touch with them. Right. Okay. All right.
We haven't requested submission of proposals for spending.
No.
So there may be people that are
waiting.
As soon as they request it, we're going to send ours in. But so we're maybe ignorant of the fact that they're going to do that.
Sure.
I mean, nobody wants to hear from me again that we don't write checks.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So I'm going to reply all on the email back from November that Jen sent out, the link to the form. But now, how do we look at the Excel sheet?
That's also a shared Google Doc. And did I not share that originally?
I'm not sure I have sharing for that.
I'll
reshare it all.
View it. Anyone can view it if you have the link.
I don't think
Well,
and later.
Okay.
yeah, so I'm going to add you, Martha,
Yep, thanks.
with your official email. That should be...
Again, it's incomplete right now, so.
So we have,
So, Tom, these bullets, Algon BAA, Mr. Cordo, and Ledgelight, these are just informational right now, or are these for discussion right now? These bullets on the agenda?
That was initiate my,
Okay. All right,
accelerate the next.
process. Okay.
I think we have to try, I don't know, to, I'm trying to think that we have to get a draft of where we think we're going to parcel money by. Yeah, we need to have that discussion and have a look at the applications that we've seen from other towns. We can all go on and grab anything we can from other towns to see what they've done for an application and the application process, or reach out to Rivercog to see what they have for us. And Tom, if you would talk to Tim about the person in Middletown that he just gave me a first name. But
Well, it might be the community foundation that's working with Rivercog
it could be.
that we heard from.
We just said it's someone in Middletown.
Okay.
And we also have to remember there'll probably be an expense for that too, which will come out of these funds.
Okay.
Are we I'm listening and thinking, one is an action item on the action item for the application form. Two is the, culling from other towns what they've used as a form. And I guess the other thing, and I sort of hear it in the background, and I apologize for my reception here, is getting back to Rivercog and see if they've quantified the costs to do the administrative pieces. Anybody heard anything back on that?
Yes, they finalized it, and they're planning on having a rollout on around the 3rd of February.
So maybe we can have
Oh,
an
great.
update on-
So we have a February 2nd meeting.
Yep.
Oh,
I'll get an update, nickel version update from Sam and have it for that meeting.
Okay, so that helps. But I think the committee members are correct in thinking that the next piece of business is to figure out where we're going with the applications. And I also, Martha and Dave got a little piece in my little report prior to this meeting, and I talked about, and I don't know that the committee wants to talk about it under new business, but I talked about setting aside a portion of the money, as other towns and municipalities did, for work within the town. I mean, some towns use the money for a particular item. Some use money for their own infrastructure and emergency services and public service folks, and then the rest was parsed out as we have done here. I don't know if we want to consider that approach, and if we do, we need to have a hard and fast answer for how we're going to present this to the selectmen, probably prior to the real final application process.
Phil, why don't you share that with the entire committee? Can you resend that to everyone so that they could read it, and then maybe we can discuss it next time?
I'm glad to do that. I can just forward that to everybody on the committee. But
Thank you.
You got that from my little piece that I sent you, right, Martha?
Yes, I did. But I think
okay.
I think everybody should have a
share
chance
that with
to
the
put
committee.
their eyes on it.
Yes, I agree. We were working in that little group, and I thought that maybe it should stay there until we have the discussion here at this meeting, and I'm glad to forward it to everybody else.
Okay, I think we need to get back on track here. Just going to say that time is flying. We had a lot of lot of emails regarding the last bullet on there, the update on the $115,000 request for at-home test kits. It started maybe a day or two after our last meeting, when also we got word from the federal government is going to be gifting every household with 4 test kits. And then we learned at the beginning of this week they're also going to be putting out N95 masks for the country. So they are responding to the emergency need and request, which is great. However, we as a committee made a motion last week, to provide emergency management with up to $115,000 for test kits. And we were clear in our messaging that we were responding to an emergency. We were clear, I think, in our discussions that we were talking about rapid test kits that everybody was trying to get post-holiday and could not. David also mentioned a desire to do some pop-up testing centers, but our motion did not include that. Subsequent to that, we now have learned that the Board of Selectmen got a request for the town meeting coming Monday that kind of, I think, jerry-rigs our motion on that call to the meeting. So I think we really need to discuss this. And then I'm going to throw in the fact that Nicole had informed us at our last meeting that this gift from the taxpayers of the United States, as long as it goes through the process of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, does not need to go to a town meeting. And if this request goes to a town meeting, then all our requests are going to be called into jeopardy to go to a town meeting. So we need to address this now.
Well, the town meeting was already published today, the agenda.
Well, then I don't know what the process is, but we need to discuss this as a committee. It shouldn't have gone there without a committee approval, because that doesn't agree with our motion. Dave and I talked about that yesterday on a phone call.
So that is the same thing? I thought we were going to the Board of Selectmen to ask for that money.
That's what we all did.
Okay.
But somehow it got jerry-rigged to go on to the town meeting
Agenda.
Is it approved by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to go to town meeting? Does it have to go through that?
Well, last night, Martha, I was in the audience, so.
I know, and you know what, my meeting notes are fogging my mind at the moment.
Understanding at 3 hours into the meeting was that the town agenda was presented to the other selectmen,
yes,
but it had to meet a deadline earlier in the day, so it was sent out prior to a BOS vote. That is just me sitting in the audience.
That's exactly what happened.
I don't think the board was funded.
So somehow the process, if there is a process, maybe it got sidelined. So I think this committee, that's my personal opinion, this committee has to address that motion that they made. That's the only thing within our control. Address that motion that we made to see if we're still on board with that. And if that's not what we agree to, then make a recommendation to use that money in a different fashion.
Would we have made that motion if we knew what the feds were going to do 2 days later? It seems to me we would have said it's a non-issue.
Correct.
The feds got control of it.
Correct.
Into discussion.
Agreed.
So why don't we just withdraw our motion and say things changed? We don't want to do it twice.
Will that get that off the agenda for the town meeting?
yes, it can.
It can?
That's what,
It's no longer an issue.
yeah, Tim, it can be pulled. According to Tim.
I make a motion in that case that we withdraw the motion that this committee recommended to the Board of Selectmen to approve up to $115,000 for test kits and distribution.
Because it's been supplanted by the federal government 2 days later.
Right, I was going to say it's superseded by the.
I'll second the motion so that we can have discussion.
Thank you.
Dave's take on that, because Dave, the testing is kind of the distribution of the test.
The original motion got worded as such, and I respect Rick Stout for his comments, do not agree that we have to get a test kit in every resident's hands, the way the meeting minutes reflected it. During the discussion point, I brought to the table of, yes, we can supplement what we're receiving from the state at that time. We can supplement the expansion of use to small businesses and other needed areas in town.
You can do that.
And in cooperation with test kits, supplying and furnishing test kits, being able to utilize those funds for other means of testing, such as bringing in a mobile testing lab for PCR tests for individuals, along with covering the costs associated with the distribution of these kits and information, and also communication out to the community of availability and awareness of test kits and other means of on-site testing.
But that motion was withdrawn, and the new motion, I mean, you can listen to the audio, and the minutes reflect pretty much exactly what was really said. The final motion that we all voted on is as stated.
Do you have the minutes in front of you, Jen?
Yeah.
So can you find, it wasn't in the minutes?
No.
Oh.
No, it wasn't in the minutes.
It wasn't in the minutes.
From the 12th, the meeting of the 12th.
Right. Can you read the way it's worded in the minutes? I know we haven't accepted them yet, but can you just do a verbal reminder for us?
No, that was the survey. It had to be in the 5th.
Yeah, this is that.
Meeting members discussed the most immediate needs during the surge in COVID cases. Seniors or isolated test kits are scarce. Rick motioned to recommend the Board of Selectmen allot up to $115,000 of ARPA funds to assist with purchasing and distribution of test kits to every resident of Old Lyme. This allocation would also include communications costs. The motion was seconded by Mary Jo. There were no abstentions or nays.
Right.
Okay.
And that was prior to what has occurred on the federal side.
Yes.
I mean, that's really the bottom line. Are we withdrawing the need to purchase
Test kits.
test kits?
While we're having discussion, I think from where I sit, I think we should withdraw our motion, be clear about how we're going to spend the balance, how we're going to respond for the balance of the spending for these requests, and then at that point, if we need to reintroduce a measure for either some other form of distribution or some other testing or some monies for town emergency personnel to distribute stuff, we could make another motion for that. That would be my opinion.
So
I agree with that.
if we withdraw this motion, will the selectmen be able to remove it from the agenda for the town meeting? Or will they? Like, is it?
I'm not sure they can if it's been advertised legally.
It would not,
But that doesn't mean they can't make an announcement at the meeting.
that's what I was.
I think that's what they. Correct, Mary Jo. I think what they have to do is address every item on the agenda, and on the agenda they have to say that the committee that proposed this has subsequently withdrawn it, and they could explain that it was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What does the meeting minutes say? Does it say 115,000 out of ARPA money, or does it say?
Yes.
It does.
But that doesn't even.
doesn't even apply to them.
Right.
So that's the other comment that needs to be made. It didn't need to go down. Thank you. And so I just, for the purposes on the phone, for people who can't hear our finance director, the ARPA allocations do not have to go for town meeting.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
So the motion?
We have a motion, we've had discussion. Any further discussion?
So are we ready to vote on that? All in favor?
Does everyone understand what we're voting on?
We're rescinding.
Yes.
The motion.
Previous motion.
And informing
Yeah.
the first selectman.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay.
Please make sure that it is written
In the minutes?
in the minutes, but it's also sent in an email to the selectmen noting what you're doing, that it is communicated to all 3 selectmen so that they are aware.
Which is why you're here too.
I am.
Okay. All right.
Committee.
Be careful what you look for you will surely
No,
find it.
she's right.
I shouldn't
give the right
sending it.
information.
I should not be sending it because I should also be receiving.
Yeah,
You should be receiving a copy.
I have received it here.
okay.
I want to see it here.
Okay, all right, so thank you. And to Dave's point about other testing opportunities, my suggestion is, Dave, I'm putting you on the spot on this one, is next week we have Ledgelight here, next meeting, February 2nd. If you could get some information, because it's really key, those testing opportunities are really key. If you could have that, some of the backup and costing information so that we could make a recommendation and have, our expert Steve Mansfield's input too, it might make perfect sense at our next meeting to think about an appropriation like that.
If you also go to the Ledgelight Health District website to look for testing locations, they're very clear. Like, we are advocating as hard as we can to get more testing in the state of Connecticut. The state is advocating for more testing. So everyone is doing this. It's just not catching up quickly enough with the need.
Well, Dave,
one of the focuses that the state is working on right now is providing testing centers to areas of disadvantage. The larger cities is where the resources are being drawn to right now. And I don't feel it's balanced properly statewide. That's the focus.
The opposite of that is people are not trying to pay for tests to get the results quicker. You're already seeing it happen.
Yeah.
You have the money, you want a private test, pay.
Right. Which I feel is inadequate across the board.
it's inequitable.
Inequitable, thank you.
Yep.
And like Dennis brought up the point last week, our insurance company is going to cover the cost of home tests after we get our federal tests. Right? That was a discussion that after January blank, your insurance company would have to cover the cost.
Well, on a high point of that, I received notification the state's going to continue with distribution of test kits and masks. They've expanded the EMD's responsibilities on this again to cover social services, people with disabilities, people with mobility issues, also with the school systems and daycare providers, along with what we had before with the general public, public safety and first responders, and frontline and municipal workers. So it is now doubled in size.
That's great.
So Dave submitted a request today.
Yes, go big or go home, 5,700 kits. Let's see what happens.
We'll get one in everybody's hand.
Get 57.
5,700.
I know, but I'm saying, who knows what you'll get.
Should we move on to our
I have no
last
idea.
action for
Yeah.
proposed new member?
Plus, we have to approve the minutes.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, yes.
What's FCCOL?
First Congregational Church of Old Lyme. So I was tasked with reaching out to the faith community to find a representative who could join our committee to represent the faith community. And Ross Higgins is a congregation member from FCCOL, First Congregational Church of Old Lyme. She has attended most of our meetings. She's not here today. And it's my understanding that she filled out the form requesting to be appointed by the selectmen and submitted it. So I'm not sure now what the next step is. So
Yeah, I don't believe that was handled at last night's meeting.
I don't think we need to do anything. We need to appoint her.
Selectmen have to approve it.
Yeah. At their February meeting. So Michelle Noren is aware.
Yes.
And she is keeping her eyes peeled for, everything's been submitted, so she has it. So I think we just need to make sure that it is an action item on the selectmen's agenda for the next regular meeting. That Ross Higgins be appointed officially and sworn into our committee.
I will handle that.
Okay, thank you. Check with Michelle Noren where that's.
I know where,
Okay, and I've been in touch with you know, she was here at our last meeting. I'm not sure why she's not here today.
She might not be on the agenda distribution list.
Well, she knows when we meet. No. The minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the January 5th, 2022 meeting. It was a regular meeting.
But I thought that...
You have to second.
I'll second.
Okay. I thought there was
a discussion.
I thought there was some change that was needed.
Is there an annotation to the January 5th meeting?
Yes.
There is. Mary Jo had brought it up. This is Suzanne. She had brought it up at the last meeting that I omitted Dave's request for the stretcher for the ambulance, Old Lyme Ambulance Association. I completely omitted that entire discussion. I do have my notes from it, and I can easily amend the minutes to include that, and I thought we were going to put that. That was what was supposed to get done today. So.
Go back and amend. We just put it in for the approval. You put the change in for the approval of the. So you're going to put the change in for today's minutes.
Today's minutes would reflect that I am amending the January 5th minutes to include that discussion, and I would talk about it or put some words around it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's so the motion should read approve the January 5th meeting minutes as amended.
As amended. I make
Yep.
that change.
Okay. Great. And as amended, and I will list the amendment.
Okay, great.
Just to keep the minutes accurate, the motion by Rick was to purchase the test kits and/or distribution and/or testing of up to 8,000 residents rather than every resident in the town of Old Lyme.
Okay.
Oh, so we're amending the June 12th ones too to say 8,000 residents.
We're just on January 5th right now.
January 5th only.
Oh, those were January 5th. Okay, sorry. 8,000 residents, not all. Okay, thank you. I'll get that.
Okay. Discussion?
We have to vote on this motion
What is the motion?
to approve the minutes of January 5th as amended.
So we haven't read what she's going to put in there about the ambulance discussion. Don't we need to see what we're approving?
I'm going to say that, Dave, there was a discussion for an immediate need at that time was for a new stretcher for the ambulance association.
I would say we'd take.
But our response was that they need to wait for the application process, that we weren't saying no, that we just need them to wait for the application process.
Okay,
Right.
I'll put, yep, I got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, given that discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the January 12th special meeting.
Cheryl will second that.
Was there any addendum to that? No?
We just need to approve them.
Okay. Good.
So we can vote on that.
We can now vote.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous?
Any new business? No.
Oh, poor Lenny just left from public comment.
Okay, public comment? No, there is no public here right now.
We have our marching orders for next week.
Okay.
February 2nd.
Yeah, do we have our action items for next meeting?
We do. We're ready to go. I think we're ready to adjourn.
Okay. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
This is Cheryl.
I'll second Cheryl's motion to adjourn.
Mary? All in favor, right?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, guys, gals.
Thank you. Take care.
Good meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. See you on the second, or hear you on the second.